Hey everybody. So this video is just an introductory video to our lesson on Introduction to Research this week. So if you've clicked on that tab for Introduction to Research, you're going to see that there's quite a few subtabs included. Below this video lesson, you're going to see a handout on basic APA guide, and then a video lesson that goes along with that. And then there's a sample APA research essay and a video lesson that goes along with that. And then a PowerPoint on useful APA information. And of course, a video lesson that goes along with that. So you're going to be getting a lot of information about APA format this week. Before we get into the specifics of APA format, though, I want to talk about Chapter 26 from the textbook. You had to read chapters 26 and 29 for last week's discussion. And the information that was in chapter 29, which is all about APA format, we're going to cover in those other subtabs below this video lesson. But I want to talk about chapter 26 first, because chapter 26 applies to any kind of research writing you're doing, whether it's APA format, MLA format, it doesn't matter. The information in this chapter is super important to research writing in general, because it's all about using sources properly and not committing plagiarism. So the chapter opened with a sample from an essay, a research essay, where the sources were used very incorrectly. They either were misused, they weren't cited at all different kinds of mistakes that were made with the source material. And then on the next page, you saw a revised version of that where the sources were used more properly. Very much worth taking a look and comparing the two. On the next page, though, page 462, is where we get into recognizing plagiarism. I want to spend a couple minutes talking about this, because I'm not sure everybody understands how far-reaching plagiarism actually is. So I want to cover all the different ways that you could find yourself in trouble for plagiarism. And then we're going to talk about some of their advice for how to keep that from happening. So plagiarism is basically when you are trying to take credit for something you did not do, whether that is a whole essay or just a section of an essay, a picture or a graphic or a chart or a table in an essay, even just one sentence in an essay. If it came from somewhere else, it's not yours. And if it's not yours, you have to give credit to the person who did create it. We're not saying you can't include it. You just have to give credit where credit is due. So obviously, one big way you can commit plagiarism is to turn in an essay that you did not write at all, right? So that could mean that you went to the internet and you went to one of those sites where you can pay to buy an essay. You might find a website where you don't have to pay. It could be that it's an article that you've just copied and pasted into Word and reformatted it so it looks like an essay instead of an article from a website. It could be that you are turning in a friend's previous work. Maybe you have a friend who took a class already, maybe the quarter before, 2 or 3, 4 quarters before, and they're letting you turn in the essay they already turned in, or an assignment. It doesn't even have to be an essay. This kind of plagiarism isn't just about citing your sources. When you're turning in something that you did not write, it's plagiarism every time. So that's the big way. That's like when the whole essay, not one word of it did you write, or not one word of that assignment did you write. That is plagiarism. Could be that you have written most of it, but maybe there's one paragraph or 2 paragraphs that you kind of copied and pasted from something online, or you had a book next to you and you typed it word for word, right? That's plagiarism, unless you give credit to that original source. But if you just copy and paste it into your document and that's it, it's plagiarism. Using just a phrase, just a sentence, right, from another source without giving it credit. That is plagiarism. Putting something into your own words, paraphrasing it, and not giving credit is plagiarism. Obviously, if you're taking something word for word, you want to give credit in quotation marks. Paraphrasing it is when you put it in your own words. There's no quotation marks, but you still have to give credit for those ideas, right? And then mixing up ideas, or mixing up your own ideas with your source material. So that means, you know you're borrowing information from your source as you're typing a couple of sentences in a paragraph. And then you give the citation for it. And then you keep going after the parentheses, and turns out that information is also from that source. But the way you have written that paragraph, it makes it look like just that first beginning part was taken from the source, and everything that comes after are your words or your thoughts. And that's not really the case. So that's plagiarism also. So you're going to learn when you go through the rest of the subtabs in this lesson, well, you're going to hear me say anyway, that APA format isn't a big deal, that we get ourselves worked up about it for no reason. Because if you just, get down to the root of what APA format is, it's very easy to kind of just put everything where it goes. I will say this though. The elements of APA format, the specifics of APA format, might not be a big deal. But using your sources correctly and giving credit to your sources, avoiding plagiarism, is a big deal. And that is what you need to be most concerned about when you do any kind of research writing. Not where does the parenthesis go, or how do I do the reference page, or what goes on my title page. You can find that information all over the place in handbooks, in textbooks, on the internet, everywhere. What you need to be super diligent about is making sure that you are giving credit where credit is due, and that you are doing your own work. And if you're borrowing from other people's work, give credit. That's what is the most important element of any kind of research writing, is making sure that you cannot be accused of plagiarism. Those are all the things that constitute plagiarism. The textbook also kind of gives some advice on ways to avoid plagiarism, right? So the first thing is just try to resist the temptation, right? You're crunched for time. You are super stressed because you have a ton of other work to do in other classes. So the temptation might be there to take something off the internet, or to turn in a friend's work that they've already submitted, 2 or 3 quarters ago. It might be tempting to just start copying and pasting, chunks of different sources that you found online. It's not all coming from the same one, but it's still not your work. So the first thing is try to just don't do it. Resist the temptation. And then, sometimes we end up plagiarizing and we didn't realize we didn't mean to, because we don't know exactly what the rules are for using sources and giving credit to them. When are we supposed to? When are we not supposed? When do we not have to? The rule is, I would say, if it's not your own original idea, you have to give credit wherever that idea came from. Whether it's a thought, an idea, you've paraphrased, you've summarized, or you've taken something word for word. If it's not your original thought, it probably needs to be cited. You probably have to give credit for it. But a couple of other things that I just want to touch on that I think the textbook points out that are important is obviously, resisting the temptation and giving yourself time to work on assignments is crucial. But when you actually start doing the research, one thing that will be super important to you is to take good notes. If you aren't able to have a hard copy of the source, like if you can't print it out and like highlight sections and things like that, then you need, if you're taking handwritten notes from a source, make sure that you are letting yourself know, did I take this word for word? Put the quotations there in your notes as you're taking the notes. Put quotation marks around anything that is taken word for word from the source. If you have paraphrased something, make a note to yourself that you paraphrased it, right? If you take good notes, and that way you know yourself, I paraphrased this, I summarized this, this came word for word from that source, then you will know that that information needs to be cited when you do the draft. Make sure that you keep a record of everything that you need to give a reference entry for a source. You obviously need the author's name. You need the title of it. If it's an article, you need the title of the article plus the title of the journal it's coming from. You need the year of publication for sure. If it's an online source, you're going to need the full URL, not just the address for a website, but the full URL up there in your search bar for that exact location on the internet. I talk about that more in some of the other lessons that come. But, just make sure that you are taking good notes for yourself and that you are keeping track of all the source information that you're using. Then you'll know that you have to give citations for that in the draft. And just remember that unless it's common knowledge, if it's not your own original idea, you have to give credit where credit is due. When you're doing the draft, if you don't remember exactly how the citation should look, what is supposed to be in the citation, which is the part in parentheses, just write something, and you can go back and fix that later. But don't make the mistake of saying to yourself, oh, I know I need to cite this, but I don't have the author's last name with me right now, so I'll just come back and do it later. And you just keep typing. There's a really good chance that after you stopped typing and you come back to that paper, there's a good chance you're not going to remember that you were supposed to go back and add a citation there. But if you just put something in parentheses, or what I do sometimes is I will underline or highlight, in a different color font that information. And then that way when I'm going back through and looking at the draft, I'll be like, oh yeah, I forgot I need to make sure that I put my citation in right here. Just anything to draw your attention back to it so that you have to add the citation in. And even if you get the citation wrong, maybe you'll get some points taken off, but at the very least, you won't be accused of plagiarism. At least you're trying to give credit to the original source, right? So I'd much rather lose out on a couple points for a incorrect citation than I would losing all the points and fail the assignment because I didn't give credit where it was due. So it's very important to just keep good notes, keep track of all your sources, make sure you yourself know what information came from a source. Was it a summary? Was it a paraphrase? Was it a direct quote? And then making sure that you allow yourself time to create the citations before you submit the paper. If you have any questions at all about whether something might be considered plagiarism or how to use sources properly, you can always get in touch with me. Even after this quarter is over, if you ever have any questions about proper research, I'm always available to help you out. I do want to talk a little bit about those 2 pages that I asked you to read for last week's discussion. Just other ways that we misuse our sources, right? So, okay, you have written a section of your research paper, you have given a citation with the author's last name and a comma and the year, so you're giving credit to the source. Nobody can accuse you of plagiarism exactly, but are you sure you have used the source correctly? the first example there on page 466 is an example of using a source inaccurately. Basically what happened here was, the student gave credit to the original source, but they used the wrong words. And in doing so, it completely changed the meaning of the original quote taken from the original source. I think it says, what makes Monroe's characters so appalling is their consistency. They fight against and seek refuse in the people they say they love. It's supposed to be appealing, not appalling. Total opposites, right? And not refuse, refuge. They seek refuge. So it completely changed the meaning. And so not only might that confuse the reader and make them think the wrong thing, it could just flat out confuse them, period, and not even understand what that quote was even used for. How does it even relate? None of it makes any sense. So if you're using direct quotes, make sure that you are not making any mistakes with the words. Using source material out of context. I know a lot of you said that you see this happen a lot what I read through the discussions. And you're right, it does. It happens a lot. We see something, we hear something, and we just snatch it right up and plop it down into what we're writing, whether or not it was really matching up or not. So you want to make sure that, if you are, let's just say, for instance, if you are writing a research paper that is in favor of something, don't take a quote or don't take information from a source that is against that thing, but make it seem like the information is for your topic. Just use them accurately. Don't overuse your source material either. This is probably another big thing that students run the risk of doing. You're writing a research paper and you have, 6 or 7 sources that you're using, and you have to give credit to those sources every time you use information from one of them. And what ends up happening is we've got citation after citation after citation after citation. Like that example there on page 466, and it's like, did you write any of this on your own? That's what it makes your reader think. If you are constantly referring to your sources, that means that not enough of your paper is your own original thought. I always tell students, like 15 to 20% of a research paper should actually be from your sources. You're not there to regurgitate information. You are there to deliver an original idea, an original thought, an original argument, an original claim. And you're just using some expert information to help back up your argument, your claim, your thought. So the majority of what the essay consists of should be your words. The source material is there sparingly to help you support it. And don't just plunk your quotations or plunk your source material, which means, you just randomly drop it into the middle of a paragraph. Everything that you write, remember, we talked about this with paragraph development, you need cohesion, right? You need things to flow smoothly, right? One idea to the next. Even if one of those ideas was taken from a source, it should still flow smoothly within the paragraph. So you wrote a sentence before it, use that sentence to then introduce the source material, right? And then after the source material, you should probably offer, a transition that explains why you used that source material. How does it fit into what you've been saying in that paragraph? I always tell students to go for the sandwich effect. You really shouldn't open a paragraph with source material, really should try not to end a paragraph with source material. You should always do your best to begin with your own ideas and end with your own ideas. Use the middle of the paragraph to flesh out those thoughts and use the resources, use your source information to help back it up. So a sandwich, right? Your words, source material, your words. Don't use, blanket citations. This means, you've written a paragraph and you've referred to some source material in it, and you just put the citation at the end of the paragraph. Okay, does that mean that everything in that paragraph was taken from that source? Or did the citation actually need to go further up in the paragraph where the source material was used? To make sure that you're putting the citation in the right spot and not just at the end of every paragraph. Don't rely too heavily on one source. That's not going to add to your credibility at all. You want to have a variety of sources that help back up your points. And then failing to match the in-text citations with the reference page entry. You'll hear a little bit about this later on in one of the other lessons. Just make sure that if you used a source in the body of the essay and you gave a citation, that means there has to be a reference entry. There has to be an entry for it on the reference page. Like I said, you're going to actually hear quite a bit more about that in the later lessons. So just make sure that you are aware of all the different things that constitute plagiarism. Come up with ways that will work for you to make sure that you don't run the risk of being accused of plagiarism. And make sure that, even beyond plagiarizing, that you are treating your sources with respect, so to speak. That you're not misusing them, you're not misrepresenting them, you're not using too many of them, but that you're not only using just one either. You got to have some, life's all about moderation, right? But just if you ever have any doubts about how to use your sources, how to cite them, how to make sure that you're not plagiarizing, just remember that as long as you're trying to give credit to your source, it can't really be considered plagiarism. So always give credit. Even if you do it wrong, you can fix it, or maybe you get a couple points knocked off for it. But it's better than failing and being accused of cheating, basically. So keep that in mind. Remember, whether it's a whole essay or one sentence, if it came from another place, you have to give credit to it. Everything else is in the details, but just make sure you understand the basics of plagiarism so that you don't find yourself in that predicament. If you ever need any help, even long after this class has ended, always feel free to come to me with advice, with advice too, if you want me to know something. But anything that you need, I will do my best to help you. But don't let research scare you. It is time consuming, yes, but everybody can do it. You just have to know where to go to find out how to do it correctly, right?